So, Matt, you weren't at the marathon, but you worked as an embedded combat trainer and an Army lieutenant in Afghanistan in 2008, where you, as you told David in his piece, you were blown up numerous times. How does what Tom described remind you of what you experienced?
It's spot on. You know, the first IED that I actually got blown up by was a pressure cooker bomb. I can also intimately know what that phase he's talking about is. It's this sort of 1,000-yard stare, but hyper sort of alert. You kind of can't just believe that happened. No, it couldn't be here. You know, the thing about it is that it kind of got to the point where in Afghanistan, I'm assuming it's true with the Iraq vets, you sort of almost got used to it. You're just like, oh, it's another bomb. Okay, it's happening. You switch into combat mode. It's time to defend yourself. I think the reason why it was so unsettling for folks like Tom, myself, and others is that it doesn't happen here. It's not supposed to happen here. And when it does, it's almost as earth-shattering, I think, as that very first time it happens to you in combat.
Texas Congressman Michael McCall was on Fox News earlier Tuesday talking about this exact thing, and I want to show everybody what he said about the explosions and the materials that were likely used in the bombings in Boston. Take a look.
But I have had some early reporting that there were shrapnel, ball bearings involved in these bombings. So, again, that's very significant when you look at the signature threat out here. The signature threat of an IED is ball bearings. So if that indeed was the case here, and we know 2 bombs went off, one was potentially self-detonated by the Coast Guard at the John F. Kennedy Library. If ball bearings were used, I think that's illustrative in terms of tracing back to the perpetrator and the motivation.
So, David, we've heard of IEDs being used, obviously, in this conversation today and in the ones earlier and in your piece in Afghanistan and Iraq. But is this the first time that we're seeing these particular IEDs used on American soil like this?
Well, it's hard to say because you remember the Times Square bomb didn't go off, actually. And so there have been a variety of homemade kind of devices that have been used going way back in history in this country and, of course, elsewhere. But this particular kind of thing, which, as I say, was designed not to kill but to maim and to mimic the kind of construction that we've seen, as Matt was saying, in Afghanistan and elsewhere, is really chilling.
I want to take a look actually quickly at my computer screen. We have a document here that's been unclassified from the Department of Homeland Security, but was prepared for local law enforcement. In 2010, the document says about IEDs. And Professor Oxley, let me turn to you because obviously this is something that's been on the radar. Your work includes the characterization and the prevention of terrorist bombings. Talk a little bit about the materials that might be in this document and that may have been used in the bombing in Boston and where they would be sourced.
Well, there's a variety of materials that could be used. At the low end of the scale is black powder, and black powder certainly would produce a lot of white smoke, which we saw there, but it's usually not very brislant unless it's juiced up in some way. You can buy black powder, but more often you can buy smokeless powder and confined. Both of those are classified as propellants, but confined as they would be in the pressure cooker. At least the smokeless powder can detonate. We've done a lot of studies on that. And then you drift into a variety of homemade explosives, which I'll skirt over for the moment. And then you have military explosives, which are generally quite hard to acquire, although some of them could be made. If we go back to homemade explosives, there's a variety, and we spend a lot of our research time characterizing those and looking at ways of trying to safe the precursors so that they can't be perverted into bombs.